throws upon the table with contempt and then departs. But if a poor devil gets into such a position as involves appearing before the justice of the peace, he has almost always spent the night in the station house with a crowd of his peers. He is regarded from the beginning as guilty. His defense is set aside with a contemptuous, "Oh, we know the excuse," and a fine imposed which he cannot pay and must work out with several months on the treadmill. And if nothing can be proved against him, he is sent to the treadmill, none the less. As a rogue and a vagabond, the partisanship of the justices of the peace, especially in the country, surpasses all description, and it is so much the order of the day that all cases which are not too utterly flagrant are quietly reported by the newspapers, without comment. Nor is anything else to be expected. For on the one hand, these Dogberries do merely construe the law according to the intent of the farmers, and on the other they are themselves bourgeois, who see the foundation of all true order in the interests of their class, and the conduct of the police corresponds to that of the justices of the peace. The bourgeois may do what he will and the police remain ever polite, adhering strictly to the law, but the proletarian is roughly, brutally treated. His poverty both casts the suspicion of every sort of crime upon him and cuts him off from legal redress against any caprice of the administrators of the law. For him, therefore, the protecting forms of the law do not exist. The police force their way into his house without further ceremony, arrest and abuse him, and only when a working men's association, such as the miners, engages a Roberts, does it become evident how little the protective side of the law exists for the working men, how frequently he has to bear all the burdens of the law without enjoying its benefits. Down to the present hour, the property-holding class in Parliament still struggles against the better feelings of those not yet fallen a prey to egotism, and seeks to subjugate the proletariat still further. One piece of common land after another is appropriated and placed under cultivation, a process by which the general cultivation is furthered, but the proletariat greatly injured. Where there were still commons, the poor could pasture an ass, a pig, or geese. The children and young people had a place where they could play and live out of doors, but this is gradually coming to an end. The earnings of the worker are less, and the young people, deprived of their playground, go to the beer shops. A mass of acts for enclosing and cultivating commons is passed at every session of Parliament. When the government determined during the session of 1844 to force the all-monopolising railways to make travelling possible for the workers by means of charges proportionate to their means, a penny a mile, and proposed therefore to introduce such a third-class train upon every railway daily, the Reverend Father in God, the Bishop of London, proposed that Sunday, the only day upon which working men in work can travel, be exempted from this rule, and travelling thus be left open to the rich and shut off from the poor. This proposition was, however, too direct, too undisguised to pass through Parliament, and was dropped. I have no room to enumerate the many concealed attacks of even one single session upon the proletariat. One from the session of 1844 must suffice. An obscure member of Parliament, a Mr. Miles, proposed a bill regulating the relation of master and servant, which seemed comparatively unobjectionable. The government became interested in the bill, and it was referred to a committee. Meanwhile, the strike among the miners in the north broke out, and Roberts made his triumphal passage through England with his acquitted working men. When the bill was reported by the committee, it was discovered that certain most despotic provisions had been interpolated in it, especially one conferring upon the employer the power to bring before any justice of the peace every workingman who had contracted verbally or in writing to do any work whatsoever, in case of refusal to work or other misbehaviour, and have him condemned to prison with hard labour for 2 months, upon the oath of the employer or his agent or overlooker, i.e., upon the oath of the accuser. This bill aroused the working men to the utmost fury, the more so as the 10 Hours Bill was before Parliament at the same time, and had called forth a considerable agitation. Hundreds of meetings were held, hundreds of working men's petitions forwarded to London to Thomas Duncombe, the representative of the interests of the proletariat. This man was, except Ferrand, the representative of Young England, the only vigorous opponent of the bill. But when the other radicals saw that the people were declaring against it, one after the other crept forward and took his place by Duncombe's side. And as the liberal bourgeoisie had not the courage to defend the bill in the face of the excitement among the working men, it was ignominiously lost. Meanwhile, the most open declaration of war of the bourgeoisie upon the proletariat is Malthus' Law of Population, and the new Poor Law framed in accordance with it. We have already alluded several times to the theory of Malthus. We may sum up its final result in these few words, that the earth is perennially overpopulated, whence poverty, misery, distress, and immorality must prevail. That it is the lot, the eternal destiny of mankind, to exist in too great numbers, and therefore in diverse classes, of which some are rich, educated, and moral, and others more or less poor, distressed, ignorant, and immoral. Hence it follows in practice, and Malthus himself drew this conclusion, that charities and poor rates are, properly speaking, nonsense, since they serve only to maintain and stimulate the increase of the surplus population whose competition crushes down wages for the employed. That the employment of the poor by the poor law guardians is equally unreasonable, since only a fixed quantity of the products of labour can be consumed, and for every unemployed labourer thus furnished employment, another hitherto employed must be driven into enforced idleness, whence private undertakings suffer at cost of poor law industry. That, in other words, the whole problem is not how to support the surplus population, but how to restrain it as far as possible. Malthus declares in plain English that the right to live, a right previously asserted in favour of every man in the world, is nonsense. He quotes the words of a poet, that the poor man comes to the feast of nature and finds no cover laid for him, and adds that she bids him begone, for he did not before his birth ask of society whether or not he is welcome. This is now the pet theory of all genuine English bourgeois, and very naturally, since it is the most specious excuse for them, and has, moreover, a good deal of truth in it under existing conditions. If, then, the problem is not to make the surplus population useful, to transform it into available population, but merely to let it starve to death in the least objectionable way, and to prevent its having too many children, this, of course, is simple enough, provided the surplus population perceives its own superfluousness, and takes kindly to starvation. There is, however, in spite of the violent exertions of the humane bourgeoisie, no immediate prospect of its succeeding in bringing about such a disposition among the workers. The workers have taken it into their heads that they, with their busy hands, are the necessary, and the rich capitalists, who do nothing, the surplus population. Since, however, the rich hold all the power, the proletarians must submit, if they will not good-temperedly perceive it for themselves, to have the law actually declare them superfluous. This has been done by the new Poor Law. The old Poor Law, which rested upon the Act of 1601, the 43rd of Elizabeth, naively started from the notion that it is the duty of the parish to provide for the maintenance of the poor. Whoever had no work received relief, and the poor man regarded the parish as pledged to protect him from starvation. He demanded his weekly relief as his right, not as a favour, and this became, at last, too much for the bourgeoisie. In 1833, when the bourgeoisie had just come into power through the Reform Bill, and pauperism in the country districts had just reached its full development, the bourgeoisie began the reform of the Poor Law according to its own point of view. A commission was appointed, which investigated the administration of the poor laws and revealed a multitude of abuses. It was discovered that the whole working class in the country was pauperized and more or less dependent upon the rates, from which they received relief when wages were low. It was found that this system by which the unemployed were maintained, the ill-paid and the parents of large families relieved, fathers of illegitimate children required to pay alimony, and poverty in general recognized as needing protection, it was found that this system was ruining the nation, was a check upon industry, a reward for improvident marriage, a stimulus to increased population, and a means of counterbalancing the effect of an increased population upon wages. A national provision for discouraging the honest and industrious, and protecting the lazy, vicious, and improvident. Calculated to destroy the bonds of family life, hinder systematically the accumulation of capital, scatter that which is already accumulated, and ruin the taxpayers. Moreover, in the provision of aliment, it sets a premium upon illegitimate children. Words of the Report of the Poor Law Commissioners 140, this description of the action of the old Poor Law is certainly correct. Relief fosters laziness and increase of surplus population. Under present social conditions, it is perfectly clear that the poor man is compelled to be an egotist, and when he can choose, living equally well in either case, he prefers doing nothing to working. But what follows therefrom? That our present social conditions are good for nothing, and not as the Malthusian commissioners conclude, that poverty is a crime, and as such to be visited with heinous penalties which may serve as a warning to others. But these wise Malthusians were so thoroughly convinced of the infallibility of their theory, that they did not for one moment hesitate to cast the poor into the Procrustean bed of their economic notions, and treat them with the most revolting cruelty. Convinced with Malthus, and the rest of the adherents of free competition, that it is best to let each one take care of himself, they would have preferred to abolish the poor laws altogether. Since, however, they had neither the courage nor the authority to do this, they proposed a poor law constructed as far as possible in harmony with the doctrine of Malthus, which is yet more barbarous than that of laissez-faire, because it interferes actively in cases in which the latter is passive. We have seen how Malthus characterizes poverty, or rather the want of employment, as a crime under the title superfluity, and recommends for it punishment by starvation. The commissioners were not quite so barbarous. Death outright by starvation was something too terrible even for a poor law commissioner. Good, said they, we grant you poor a right to exist, but only to exist. The right to multiply you have not, nor the right to exist as befits human beings. You are a pest, and if we cannot get rid of you as we do of other pests, you shall feel at least that you are a pest, and you shall at least be held in check, kept from bringing into the world other surplus, either directly or through inducing in others laziness and want of employment. Live you shall, but live as an awful warning to all those who might have inducements to become superfluous. They accordingly brought in the new Poor Law, which was passed by Parliament in 1834, and continues in force down to the present day. All relief in money and provisions was abolished. The only relief allowed was admission to the workhouses immediately built. The regulations for these workhouses, or, as the people call them, Poor Law Bastilles, is such as to frighten away everyone who has the slightest prospect of life without this form of public charity, to make sure that relief be applied for only in the most extreme cases, and after every other effort had failed, the workhouse has been made the most repulsive residence which the refined ingenuity of a Malthusian can invent. The food is worse than that of the most ill-paid workingman while employed, and the work harder, or they might prefer the workhouse to their wretched existence outside. Meat, especially fresh meat, is rarely furnished, chiefly potatoes. The worst possible bread and oatmeal porridge, little or no beer. The food of criminal prisoners is better, as a rule, so that the paupers frequently commit some offence for the purpose of getting into jail. For the workhouse is a jail too. He who does not finish his task gets nothing to eat. He who wishes to go out must ask permission, which is granted or not, according to his behaviour or the inspector's whim. Tobacco is forbidden, also the receipt of gifts from relatives or friends outside the house. The paupers wear a workhouse uniform, and are handed over, helpless and without redress to the caprice of the inspectors. To prevent their labour from competing with that of outside concerns, they are set to rather useless tasks. The men break stones, as much as a strong man can accomplish with effort in a day. The women, children, and aged men pick oakum, for I know not what insignificant use, to prevent the superfluous from multiplying, and demoralized parents from influencing their children. Families are broken up. The husband is placed in one wing, the wife in another, the children in a third, and they are permitted to see one another only at stated times after long intervals, and then only when they have, in the opinion of the officials, behaved well. And in order to shut off the external world from contamination by pauperism within these bastilles, the inmates are permitted to receive visits only with the consent of the officials and in the reception rooms, to communicate in general with the world outside only by leave and under supervision. Yet the food is supposed to be wholesome and the treatment humane with all this. But the intent of the law is too loudly outspoken for this requirement to be in any wise fulfilled. The poor law commissioners and the whole English bourgeoisie deceive themselves if they believe the administration of the law possible without these results. The treatment which the letter of the law prescribes is in direct contradiction of its spirit. If the law in its essence proclaims the poor criminals, the workhouses, prisons, their inmates beyond the pale of the law, beyond the pale of humanity, objects of disgust and repulsion, then all commands to the contrary are unavailing. In practice, the spirit and not the letter of the law is followed in the treatment of the poor, as in the following few examples. In the workhouse at Greenwich, in the summer of 1843, a boy 5 years old was punished by being shut into the dead room, where he had to sleep upon the lids of the coffins. In the workhouse at Herne, the same punishment was inflicted upon a little girl for wetting the bed at night, and this method of punishment seems to be a favourite. This workhouse, which stands in one of the most beautiful regions of Kent, is peculiar, in so far as its windows open only upon the court, and but two, newly introduced, afford the inmates a glimpse of the outer world. The author who relates this in the Illuminated magazine closes his description with the words, "If God punished men for crimes as man punishes man for poverty, then woe to the sons of Adam." In November 1843, a man died at Leicester, who had been dismissed 2 days before from the workhouse at Coventry. The details of the treatment of the poor in this institution are revolting. The man, George Robson, had a wound upon the shoulder, the treatment of which was wholly neglected. He was set to work at the pump using the sound arm, was given only the usual workhouse fare, which he was utterly unable to digest by reason of the unhealed wound and his general debility. He naturally grew weaker, and the more he complained, the more brutally he was treated. When his wife tried to bring him her drop of beer, she was reprimanded, and forced to drink it herself in the presence of the female warder. He became ill, but received no better treatment. Finally, at his own request, and under the most insulting epithets, he was discharged, accompanied by his wife. 2 days later he died at Leicester, in consequence of the neglected wound and of the food given him, which was utterly indigestible for one in his condition, as the surgeon present at the inquest testified. When he was discharged, there were handed to him letters containing money which had been kept back 6 weeks, and opened according to a rule of the establishment by the inspector. In Birmingham such scandalous occurrences took place that finally in 1843 an official was sent to investigate the case. He found that 4 tramps had been shut up naked under a staircase in a black hole 8 to 10 days, often deprived of food until noon, and that at the severest season of the year, a little boy had been passed through all grades of punishment known to the institution. First locked up in a damp, vaulted, narrow lumber room, then in the dog hole twice, the second time 3 days and 3 nights. Then the same length of time in the old dog hole, which was still worse. Then the tramp room, a stinking, disgustingly filthy hole with wooden sleeping stalls, where the official in the course of his inspection found 2 other tattered boys, shriveled with cold, who had been spending 3 days there. In the dog hole there were often 7, and in the tramp room 20 men huddled together. Women also were placed in the dog hole because they refused to go to church, and one was shut 4 days into the tramp room, with God knows what sort of company, and that while she was ill and receiving medicine. Another woman was placed in the insane department for punishment, though she was perfectly sane. In the workhouse at Bacton in Suffolk in January 1844, a similar investigation revealed the fact that a feeble-minded woman was employed as nurse, and took care of the patients accordingly, while sufferers who were often restless at night or tried to get up were tied fast with cords passed over the covering and under the bedstead to save the nurses the trouble of sitting up at night. One patient was found dead, bound in this way. In the St. Pancras workhouse in London, where the cheap shirts already mentioned are made, an epileptic died of suffocation during an attack in bed, no one coming to his relief. In the same house 4 to 6, sometimes 8 children slept in one bed. In Shoreditch workhouse a man was placed, together with a fever patient violently ill, in a bed teeming with vermin. In Bethnal Green workhouse, London, a woman in the 6th month of pregnancy was shut up in the reception room with her 2-year-old child, from February 28th to March 20th, without being admitted into the workhouse itself, and without a trace of a bed or the means of satisfying the most natural wants. Her husband, who was brought into the workhouse, begged to have his wife released from this imprisonment, whereupon he received 24 hours imprisonment, with bread and water, as the penalty of his insolence. In the workhouse at Slough near Windsor, a man lay dying in September 1844. His wife journeyed to him, arriving at midnight, and hastening to the workhouse was refused admission. She was not permitted to see her husband until the next morning, and then only in the presence of a female warder who forced herself upon the wife at every succeeding visit, sending her away at the end of half an hour. In the workhouse at Middleton in Lancashire 12, and at times 18 paupers of both sexes slept in one room. This institution is not embraced by the new Poor Law, but is administered under an old special act, Gilbert's Act. The inspector had instituted a brewery in the house for his own benefit. In Stockport, July 31st, 1844, a man, 72 years old, was brought before the Justice of the Peace for refusing to break stones, and insisting that, by reason of his age and a stiff knee, he was unfit for his work. In vain did he offer to undertake any work adapted to his physical strength. He was sentenced to 2 weeks upon the treadmill. In the workhouse at Basford, an inspecting official found that the sheets had not been changed in 13 weeks, shirts in 4 weeks, stockings in 2 to 10 months, so that of 45 boys but 3 had stockings, and all their shirts were in tatters. The beds swarmed with vermin, and the tableware was washed in the slop pails. In the West of London workhouse, a porter who had infected 4 girls with syphilis was not discharged, and another who had concealed a deaf and dumb girl 4 days and nights in his bed was also retained. As in life, so in death, the poor are dumped into the earth like infected cattle. The pauper burial ground of St. Bride's, London, is a bare morass, in use as a cemetery since the time of Charles Roman II, and filled with heaps of bones. Every Wednesday the paupers are thrown into a ditch 14 feet deep. A curate rattles through the litany at the top of his speed. The ditch is loosely covered in, to be reopened the next Wednesday, and filled with corpses as long as one more can be forced in. The putrefaction thus engendered contaminates the whole neighbourhood. In Manchester, the pauper burial ground lies opposite to the old town, along the Irk. This, too, is a rough, desolate place. About 2 years ago a railroad was carried through it. If it had been a respectable cemetery, how the bourgeoisie and the clergy would have shrieked over the desecration. But it was a pauper burial ground, the resting place of the outcast and superfluous, so no one concerned himself about the matter. It was not even thought worthwhile to convey the partially decayed bodies to the other side of the cemetery. They were heaped up just as it happened, and piles were driven into newly made graves, so that the water oozed out of the swampy ground, pregnant with putrefying matter, and filled the neighborhood with the most revolting and injurious gases. The disgusting brutality which accompanied this work I cannot describe in further detail. Can anyone wonder that the poor decline to accept public relief under these conditions, that they starve rather than enter these Bastilles? I have the reports of 5 cases in which persons actually starving, when the guardians refused them outdoor relief, went back to their miserable homes and died of starvation rather than enter these hells. Thus far have the Poor Law Commissioners attained their object. At the same time, however, the workhouses have intensified, more than any other measure of the party in power, the hatred of the working class against the property holders, who very generally admire the new poor law. From Newcastle to Dover there is but one voice among the workers, the voice of hatred against the new law. The bourgeoisie has formulated so clearly in this law its conception of its duties towards the proletariat that it has been appreciated even by the dullest. So frankly, so boldly had the conception never yet been formulated, that the non-possessing class exists solely for the purpose of being exploited, and of starving when the property holders can no longer make use of it. Hence it is that this new poor law has contributed so greatly to accelerate the labour movement, and especially to spread Chartism. And as it is carried out most extensively in the country, it facilitates the development of the proletarian movement, which is arising in the agricultural districts. Let me add that a similar law in force in Ireland since 1838 affords a similar refuge for 80,000 paupers. Here, too, it has made itself disliked, and would have been intensely hated if it had attained anything like the same importance as in England. But what difference does the ill treatment of 80,000 proletarians make in a country in which there are 2.5 million of them? In Scotland there are, with local exceptions, no poor laws. I hope that after this picture of the new poor law and its results, no word which I have said of the English bourgeoisie will be thought too stern. In this public measure, in which it acts in corpore as the ruling power, it formulates its real intentions, reveals the animus of those smaller transactions with the proletariat, of which the blame apparently attaches to individuals. And that this measure did not originate with any one section of the bourgeoisie, but enjoys the approval of the whole class, is proved by the parliamentary debates of 1844. The Liberal Party had enacted the new Poor Law. The Conservative Party, with its Prime Minister Peel at the head, defends it, and only alters some pettifogging trifles in the Poor Law Amendment Bill of 1844. A Liberal majority carried the bill, a Conservative majority approved it, and the noble lords gave their consent each time. Thus is the expulsion of the proletariat from state and society outspoken. Thus is it publicly proclaimed that proletarians are not human beings, and do not deserve to be treated as such. Let us leave it to the proletarians of the British Empire to reconquer their human rights. 141. Such is the state of the British working class, as I have come to know it in the course of 21 months, through the medium of my own eyes, and through official and other trustworthy reports. And when I call this condition, as I have frequently enough done in the foregoing pages, an utterly unbearable one, I am not alone in so doing. As early as 1833, Gaskell declared that he despaired of a peaceful issue, and that a revolution can hardly fail to follow. In 1838, Carlyle explained Chartism and the revolutionary activity of the working men as arising out of the misery in which they live, and only wondered that they have sat so quietly 8 long years at the Barmecide feast, at which they have been regaled by the liberal bourgeoisie with empty promises. And in 1844 he declared that the work of organising labour must be begun at once, if Europe, or at least England, is long to remain inhabitable. And the Times, the first journal of Europe, said in June 1844, "War to palaces, peace unto cabins, That is a battle cry of terror which may come to resound throughout our country. Let the wealthy beware. Meanwhile, let us review once more the chances of the English bourgeoisie. In the worst case, foreign manufacture, especially that of America, may succeed in withstanding English competition, even after the repeal of the Corn Laws, inevitable in the course of a few years. German manufacture is now making great efforts, and that of America has developed with giant strides. America, with its inexhaustible resources, with its unmeasured coal and iron fields, with its unexampled wealth of water power and its navigable rivers, but especially with its energetic, active population, in comparison with which the English are phlegmatic dawdlers. America has in less than 10 years created a manufacture which already competes with England in the coarser cotton goods, has excluded the English from the markets of North and South America, and holds its own in China, side by side with England. If any country is adapted to holding a monopoly of manufacture, it is America. Should English manufacture be thus vanquished, and in the course of the next 20 years, if the present conditions remain unchanged, this is inevitable. The majority of the proletariat must become forever superfluous and has no other choice than to starve or to rebel. Does the English bourgeoisie reflect upon this contingency? On the contrary, its favourite economist McCulloch teaches from his student's desk that a country so young as America, which is not even properly populated, cannot carry on manufacture successfully or dream of competing with an old manufacturing country like England. It were madness in the Americans to make the attempt, for they could only lose by it. Better far for them to stick to their agriculture, and when they have brought their whole territory under the plough, a time may perhaps come for carrying on manufacture with a profit. So says the wise economist, and the whole bourgeoisie worships him, while the Americans take possession of one market after another, while a daring American speculator recently even sent a shipment of American cotton goods to England, where they were sold for re-exportation. But assuming that England retained the monopoly of manufactures, that its factories perpetually multiply, what must be the result? The commercial crises would continue and grow more violent, more terrible, with the extension of industry and the multiplication of the proletariat. The proletariat would increase in geometrical proportion, in consequence of the progressive ruin of the lower middle class and the giant strides with which capital is concentrating itself in the hands of the few. And the proletariat would soon embrace the whole nation, with the exception of a few millionaires. But in this development there comes a stage at which the proletariat perceives how easily the existing power may be overthrown, and then follows a revolution. Neither of these supposed conditions may, however, be expected to arise. The commercial crises, the mightiest levers for all independent development of the proletariat, will probably shorten the process, acting in concert with foreign competition and the deepening ruin of the lower middle class. I think the people will not endure more than one more crisis. The next one, in 1846 or 1847, will probably bring with it the repeal of the Corn Laws 142 and the enactment of the Charter. What revolutionary movements the Charter may give rise to remains to be seen. But by the time of the next following crisis, which, according to the analogy of its predecessors, must break out in 1852 or 1853, unless delayed perhaps by the repeal of the Corn Laws or hastened by other influences, such as foreign competition. By the time this crisis arrives, the English people will have had enough of being plundered by the capitalists and left to starve when the capitalists no longer require their services. If up to that time the English bourgeoisie does not pause to reflect, and to all appearance it certainly will not do so, a revolution will follow with which none hitherto known can be compared. The proletarians, driven to despair, will seize the torch which Stephens has preached to them. The vengeance of the people will come down with a wrath of which the rage of 1793 gives no true idea. The war of the poor against the rich will be the bloodiest ever waged. Even the union of a part of the bourgeoisie with the proletariat, even a general reform of the bourgeoisie, would not help matters. Besides, the change of heart of the bourgeoisie could only go as far as a lukewarm just milieu. The more determined, uniting with the workers, would only form a new giant and succumb in the course of the mighty development. The prejudices of a whole class cannot be laid aside like an old coat. Least of all, those of the stable, narrow, selfish English bourgeoisie. These are all inferences which may be drawn with the greatest certainty. Conclusions, the premises for which are undeniable facts, partly of historical development, partly facts inherent in human nature. Prophecy is nowhere so easy as in England, where all the component elements of society are clearly defined and sharply separated. The revolution must come. It is already too late to bring about a peaceful solution, but it can be made more gentle than that prophesied in the foregoing pages. This depends, however, more upon the development of the proletariat than upon that of the bourgeoisie. In proportion as the proletariat absorbs socialistic and communistic elements, will the revolution diminish in bloodshed, revenge, and savagery. Communism stands in principle above the breach between bourgeoisie and proletariat, recognizes only its historic significance for the present, but not its justification for the future. Wishes indeed to bridge over this chasm, to do away with all class antagonisms. Hence it recognizes as justified, so long as the struggle exists, the exasperation of the proletariat towards its oppressors as a necessity, as the most important lever for a labor movement just beginning. But it goes beyond this exasperation, because communism is a question of humanity, and not of the workers alone. Besides, it does not occur to any communist to wish to revenge himself upon individuals, or to believe that, in general, the single bourgeois can act otherwise, under existing circumstances, than he does act. English socialism, i.e. communism, rests directly upon the irresponsibility of the individual. Thus, the more the English workers absorb communistic ideas, the more superfluous becomes their present bitterness, which, should it continue so violent as at present, could accomplish nothing, and the more their action against the bourgeoisie will lose its savage cruelty. If indeed it were possible to make the whole proletariat communistic before the war breaks out, the end would be very peaceful. But that is no longer possible. The time has gone by. Meanwhile, I think that before the outbreak of open, declared war of the poor against the rich, there will be enough intelligent comprehension of the social question among the proletariat to enable the Communistic Party, with the help of events, to conquer the brutal element of the revolution and prevent a ninth Thermidor. In any case, the experience of the French will not have been undergone in vain, and most of the Chartist leaders are, moreover, already communists. And as communism stands above the strife between bourgeoisie and proletariat, it will be easier for the better elements of the bourgeoisie, which are, however, deplorably few, and can look for recruits only among the rising generation, to unite with it than with purely proletarian Chartism. If these conclusions have not been sufficiently established in the course of the present work, there may be other opportunities for demonstrating that they are necessary consequences of the historical development of England. But this I maintain, the war of the poor against the rich now carried on in detail, and indirectly will become direct and universal. It is too late for a peaceful solution. The classes are divided more and more sharply. The spirit of resistance penetrates the workers. The bitterness intensifies. The guerrilla skirmishes become concentrated in more important battles, and soon a slight impulse will suffice to set the avalanche in motion. Then, indeed, will the war cry resound through the land, war to the palaces, peace to the cottages. But then it will be too late for the rich to beware. Translators note being unable at this late day to obtain the original English, The translator has been compelled to retranslate from the German the passages quoted in the text from the following sources: G. Alston, Preacher of St. Philip's, Bethnal Green. D. W. P. Allison, F.R.S.E., Observations on the Management of the Poor in Scotland, 1840. The Artisan, 1842, October number. J. C. Symonds, Arts and Artisans at Home and Abroad, Edin, 1839. Report of the Town Council of Leeds, published in Statistical Journal Vol. Roman 2 p. 404. Nassau W. Senior, Letters on the Factory Act to the R.T. Hon, the President of the Board of Trade Chars. Poulett Thompson-esque, London, 1837. Report of the Children's Employment Commission. Mr. Parkinson, Canon of Manchester, On the Present Condition of the Labouring Poor in Manchester, 3rd ed., 1841. Factories Inquiries Commission's Report. E. G. Wakefield, M.P., Swing Unmasked, or The Cause of Rural Incendiarism, London, 1831, a correspondent of the Morning Chronicle. Anonymous Pamphlet on the State of Ireland, London, 1807, 2nd ed., 1821. Report of the Poor Law Commissioners, extracts from information received by the Poor Law Commissioners. Published by Authority, London, 1833. Endnotes according to Porter's Progress of the Nation, London, 1836, Vol. I, 1838, Vol. Roman 2, 1843, Vol. Roman 3, Official Data, and other sources chiefly official. Write compare on this point my Outlines for a Critique of Political Economy in the Deutsch Französische Jahrbucher. Write this applies to the time of sailing vessels. The Thames now is a dreary collection of ugly steamers. F. E. Wright Times, Oct. 12th, 1843. Wright, quoted by Dr. W. P. Allison, F.R.S.E., Fellow and late President of the Royal College of Physicians, etc., etc. Observations on the Management of the Poor in Scotland and its Effects on the Health of Great Towns. Edinburgh, 1840. The author is a religious Tory, brother of the historian Archibald Allison. Write report to the Home Secretary from the Poor Law Commissioners on an inquiry into the sanitary condition of the labouring classes in Great Britain with appendix. Presented to both Houses of Parliament in July 1842, 3 vols. Folio. Write the Artisan, October 1842. Write Arts and Artisan at Home and Abroad, by J. C. Symonds, Edinburgh, 1839. The author, as it seems himself a Scotchman, is a liberal, and consequently fanatically opposed to every independent movement of working men. The passages here cited are to be found p. 116 et seq. Right, it must be borne in mind that these cellars are not mere storing rooms for rubbish, but dwellings of human beings. Right, compare report of the Town Council in the Statistical Journal, Vol. 2 p. 404. Right, the moral and physical condition of the working classes employed in the cotton manufacture in Manchester. By James Phk. M.D., 2nd ed., 1832. Dr. K confuses the working class in general with the factory workers, otherwise an excellent pamphlet. Right, and yet an English liberal Weissacker asserts, in the report of the Children's Employment Commission, that these courts are the masterpiece of municipal architecture, because, like a multitude of little parks, they improve ventilation, the circulation of air. Certainly, if each court had 2 or 4 broad open entrances facing each other, through which the air could pour, but they never have 2, rarely 1, and usually only a narrow covered passage. Write Nassau W. Senior, Letters on the Factory Act to the R.T. Hon, the President of the Board of Trade Chars. Poulett Thompson-esque, London, 1837, p. 24, Wright K. See Note 1, Wright P. Gaskell, The Manufacturing Population of England, its moral, social and physical condition and the changes which have arisen from the use of steam machinery, with an examination of infant labour. Fiat Justicia, 1833, depicting chiefly the state of the working class in Lancashire. The author is a liberal, but wrote at a time when it was not a feature of liberalism to chant the happiness of the workers. He is therefore unprejudiced, and can afford to have eyes for the evils of the present state of things, and especially for the factory system. On the other hand, he wrote before the Factories Enquiry Commission, and adopts from untrustworthy sources many assertions afterwards refuted by the report of the Commission. This work, although on the whole a valuable one, can therefore only be used with discretion, especially as the author, like Kay, confuses the whole working class with the mill hands. The history of the development of the proletariat contained in the introduction to the present work is chiefly taken from this work of Gaskell's. Wright Thomas Carlyle, Chartism, London, 1840, p. 28. Wright, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations I. McCulloch's edition in 1 volume, sect. 8, p. 36. The wear and tear of a slave, it has been said, is at the expense of his master, but that of a free servant is at his own expense. The wear and tear of the latter, however, is, in reality, as much at the expense of his master as that of the former. The wages paid to journeymen and servants of every kind must be such as may enable them, one with another, to continue the race of journeymen and servants, according as the increasing, diminishing, or stationary demand of the society may happen to require. But though the wear and tear of a free servant be equally at the expense of his master, it generally costs him much less than that of a slave. The fund for replacing or repairing, if I may say so, the wear and tear of the slave, is commonly managed by a negligent master or careless overseer. Wright, and it came in 1847. Wright Archibald Allison, Principles of Population and Their Connection with Human Happiness, 2 vols, 1840. This Allison is the historian of the French Revolution, and like his brother, Dr. W. P. Allison, a religious Tory. Wright Chartism, pp. 28, 31, etc. Wright, when as here and elsewhere I speak of society as a responsible whole, having rights and duties, I mean, of course, the ruling power of society, the class which at present holds social and political control, and bears, therefore, the responsibility for the condition of those to whom it grants no share in such control. This ruling class in England, as in all other civilized countries, is the bourgeoisie. But that this society, and especially the bourgeoisie, is charged with the duty of protecting every member of society, at least in his life, to see to it, for example, that no one starves, I need not now prove to my German readers. If I were writing for the English bourgeoisie, the case would be different. And so it is now in Germany. Our German capitalists are fully up to the English level, in this respect at least, in the year of grace, 1886. Wright Dr. Allison, Management of the Poor in Scotland. Wright Allison, Principles of Population, Vol. II. Wright Dr. Allison in an article read before the British Association for the Advancement of Science. October 1844 in York. Wright Manufacturing Population, ch. 8. Wright Report of Commission of Inquiry into the Employment of Children and Young Persons in Mines and Collieries, and in the trades and manufactures in which numbers of them work together, not being included under the terms of the Factories Regulation Act. First and second reports, Granger's Report. Second report usually cited as Children's Employment Commission's report. First report, 1841. Second report, 1843. Wright Fifth Annual Report of the Reg. Gen. of Births, Deaths and Marriages. Wright Dr. Cohen. Vital Statistics of Glasgow. Wright Report of Commission of Inquiry into the State of Large Towns and Populous Districts. First Report, 1844. Appendix, Wright Factories Inquiry Commission's Reports, 3rd vol. Report of Dr. Hawkins on Lancashire, in which Dr. Robertson is cited, the chief authority for statistics in Manchester. Wright quoted by Dr. Wade from the report of the Parliamentary Factories Commission of 1832 in his History of the Middle and Working Classes. London, 1835, 3rd ed. Wright Children's Employment Commission's Report. App. Part Roman 2Q. 18 no. 216, 217, 226, 233, etc. Horn. Right Children's Employment Commission's report. App. Part II Evidence p. 939, 133. Right Children's Employment Commission's report. App. Part II p. 936, 146. Right Children's Employment Commission's report. App. Part II p. 34, 158. Right Simmons Rep. App. Part I ppe 22 et sec. Right Arts and Artisans. Right Principles of Population Vol. Roman 2 pp. 136, 197. Right We shall see later how the rebellion of the working class against the bourgeoisie in England is legalized by the right of coalition. Right Chartism p. 34 et sec. Right Chartism p. 40. Right Shall I call bourgeois witnesses to bear testimony from me here too? I select one only whom everyone may read, namely Adam Smith. Wealth of Nations, McCulloch's 4-volume edition, Vol. Roman 3 Book 5 Chap. 8 p. 297. Right Principles of Population Vol. Roman 2 p. 76 et sec. p. 82 p. 135. Right Philosophy of Manufactures London 1835 p. 406 et sec. We shall have occasion to refer further to this reputable work. Right on the Present Condition of the Labouring Poor in Manchester etc. By the Rev. R.D. Parkinson, Canon of Manchester, 3rd ed. London and Manchester, 1841, pamphlet. Right Manufacturing Population of England, chap. 10. Right The total of population about 15 millions divided by the number of convicted criminals, 22,733. Right The Cotton Manufacture of Great Britain by Dr. A. Ure, 1836. Right History of the Cotton Manufacture of Great Britain by E. Baines-esque. Right Stubborn Facts from the Factories by a Manchester Operative. Published and dedicated to the working classes by W. M. Rashley M.P. London Olivier 1844 p. 28 et sec. Right Compare Factories Inquiry Commission's report. Right L. Simmons in Arts and Artisans. Right C. Dr. Ure in the Philosophy of Manufacture. Right Report of Factory Inspector L. Homer, October, 1844. The state of things in the matter of wages is greatly perverted in certain branches of cotton manufacture in Lancashire. There are hundreds of young men, between 20 and 30, employed as piecers and otherwise, who do not get more than 8 or 9 shillings a week, while children under 13 years, working under the same roof, earn 5 shillings, and young girls from 16 to 20 years, 10–12 shillings per week. Right Report of Factories Inquiry Commission. Testimony of Dr. Hawkins, P3 Right in 1843, among the accidents brought to the infirmary in Manchester, 189 were from burning. Right Factories Inquiry Commission's report, Powers Report on Leeds. Passim Tufnell Report on Manchester, P17. Etc. Right This letter is retranslated from the German, no attempt being made to reproduce either the spelling or the original Yorkshire dialect. Right How numerous married women are in the factories is seen from information furnished by a manufacturer. In 412 factories in Lancashire, 10,721 of them were employed. Of the husbands of these women, but 5,314 were also employed in the factories. 3,927 were otherwise employed. 821 were unemployed, and information was wanting as to 659, or 2, if not 3 men for each factory are supported by the work of their wives. Right House of Commons, March 15, 1844. Right Factories Inquiry Commission's report, P4, Right for further examples and information compare Factories Inquiry Commission's report. Cowell Evidence, pp. 37, 38, 39, 72, 77, 59. Tufnell Evidence, pp. 9, 15, 45, 54, etc. Right Cowell Evidence, pp. 35, 37 and elsewhere. Right Power Evidence, p8, Right Cowell Evidence, p57, Right Cowell Evidence, p82. Right Factories Inquiry Commission's report, p4 Hawkins. Right Stewart Evidence, p35. Right Tufnell Evidence, p91. Right Dr. Loud on Evidence pp 12-13. Right Dr. Loud on Evidence p. 16. Right Drinkwater Evidence pp 72-80, 146, 148, 150 Two Brothers, 69 Two Brothers, 155 and many others. Power Evidence pp 63-66, 67 Two Cases, 68 Three Cases, 69 Two Cases, in Leeds pp 29, 31, 40, 43, 53 et seq. Loud on Evidence pp 4, 7 Four Cases, 8 Several Cases etc. Sir D. Barry Evidence pp 6, 8, 13, 21, 22, 44, 55 Three Cases etc. Tufnell Evidence pp. 5, 6, 16 etc. Wright Factories Inquiry Commission's Report 1836, Sir D. Barry Evidence, p. 21 Two Cases. Wright Factories Inquiry Commission's Report 1836, Loud on Evidence pp 13, 16 etc. Right in the spinning room of a mill at Leeds 2 chairs had been introduced. Drinkwater Evidence p. 80. Wright General Report by Sir D. Barry. Wright Power Report p. 74. Wright The surgeons in England are scientifically educated as well as the physicians, and have, in general, medical as well as surgical practice. They are in general, for various reasons, preferred to the physicians. Wright This statement is not taken from the report. Wright Tufnell p. 59. Wright Stewart Evidence p. 101. Wright Tufnell Evidence pp 39-15. Wright Hawkins Report p. 4 Evidence p. 14 etc. etc. Hawkins Evidence pp 11-13. Wright Cowell Evidence p. 77. Wright Sir D. Barry Evidence p. 44. Wright Cowell p. 35. Wright Dr. Hawkins Evidence p. 11, Dr. Loudon p. 14 etc. Sir D. Barry p. 5 etc. Wright Compare Stewart pp 1370 101, Mackintosh p. 24 etc. Power Report on Nottingham on Leeds, Cowell p. 33 etc. Barry p. 12. 5. Cases in One Factory pp 17 44 52 60 etc. Loudon p. 13, Wright Stewart p. 39. Wright Philosophy of Manufactures by Dr. Andrew Ure p. 277 et seq. Wright Philosophy of Manufactures 277. Wright Philosophy of Manufactures p. 298. Wright Philosophy of Manufactures p. 301. Wright Dr. Andrew Ure Philosophy of Manufactures pp. 405 406 et seq. Wright afterwards Earl of Shaftesbury died 1885. Wright It is notorious that the House of Commons made itself ridiculous a second time in the same session in the same way on the sugar question, when it first voted against the ministry, and then for it, after an application of the ministerial whip. Wright Let us hear another competent judge. If we consider the example of the Irish in connection with the ceaseless toil of the cotton operative class, we shall wonder less at their terrible demoralization. Continuous exhausting toil, day after day, year after year, is not calculated to develop the intellectual and moral capabilities of the human being. The wearisome routine of endless drudgery, in which the same mechanical process is ever repeated, is like the torture of Sisyphus. The burden of toil, like the rock, is ever falling back upon the worn-out drudge. The mind attains neither knowledge nor the power of thought from the eternal employment of the same muscles. The intellect dozes off in dull indolence, but the coarser part of our nature reaches a luxuriant development. To condemn a human being to such work is to cultivate the animal quality in him. He grows indifferent. He scorns the impulses and customs which distinguish his kind. He neglects the conveniences and finer pleasures of life, lives in filthy poverty with scanty nourishment, and squanders the rest of his earnings in debauchery. Dr. J. K. Wright Manchester Guardian, October 30th. Wright Stubborn Facts p. 9 et seq. Wright Drinkwater Evidence p. 80. Wright Stubborn Facts pp. 1317. Wright Sun, a London daily. End of November 1844. Right, I have neither time nor space to deal in detail with the replies of the manufacturers to the charges made against them for 12 years past. These men will not learn because their supposed interest blinds them. As, moreover, many of their objections have been met in the foregoing, the following is all that it is necessary for me to add. You come to Manchester, you wish to make yourself acquainted with the state of affairs in England. You naturally have good introductions to respectable people. You drop a remark or two as to the condition of the workers. You are made acquainted with a couple of the first liberal manufacturers, Robert Hyde Gregg, perhaps, Edmund Ashworth, Thomas Ashton, or others. They are told of your wishes. The manufacturer understands you, knows what he has to do. He accompanies you to his factory in the country. Mr. Gregg to Quarrybank in Cheshire, Mr. Ashworth to Turton near Bolton, Mr. Ashton to Hyde. He leads you through a superb, admirably arranged building, perhaps supplied with ventilators. He calls your attention to the lofty, airy rooms, the fine machinery, here and there a healthy-looking operative. He gives you an excellent lunch, and proposes to you to visit the operatives' homes. He conducts you to the cottages, which look new, clean and neat, and goes with you into this one and that one, naturally only to overlookers, mechanics, etc., so that you may see families who live wholly from the factory. Among other families you might find that only wife and children work, and the husband darns stockings. The presence of the employer keeps you from asking indiscreet questions. You find everyone well paid, comfortable, comparatively healthy by reason of the country air. You begin to be converted from your exaggerated ideas of misery and starvation. But that the cottage system makes slaves of the operatives, that there may be a truck shop in the neighbourhood, that the people hate the manufacturer, this they do not point out to you, because he is present. He has built a school, church, reading room, etc., that he uses the school to train children to subordination, that he tolerates in the reading room such prints only as represent the interests of the bourgeoisie, that he dismisses his employees if they read Chartist or Socialist papers or books. This is all concealed from you. You see an easy, patriarchal relation. You see the life of the overlookers. You see what the bourgeoisie promises the workers if they become its slaves, mentally and morally. This country manufacture has always been what the employers like to show, because in it the disadvantages of the factory system, especially from the point of view of health, are in part done away with by the free air and surroundings, and because the patriarchal servitude of the workers can here be longest maintained. Dr. Ure sings a dithyramb upon the theme, but woe to the operatives to whom it occurs to think for themselves and become Chartists. For them the paternal affection of the manufacturer comes to a sudden end. Further, if you should wish to be accompanied through the working people's quarters of Manchester, if you should desire to see the development of the factory system in a factory town, you may wait long before these rich bourgeoisie will help you. These gentlemen do not know in what condition their employees are nor what they want, and they dare not know things which would make them uneasy, or even oblige them to act in opposition to their own interests. But fortunately, that is of no consequence. What the working men have to carry out, they carry out for themselves. Wright Granger Report, Appendix Part I, pp. 7, 15 et seq. 132-142. Wright Granger's whole report. Wright Granger Children's Employment Commission's report. Wright Burns Children's Employment Commission's report. Wright Leach Stubborn Facts from the Factories P47. Wright Leach. Stubborn Facts from the Factories P33. Wright Leach. Stubborn Facts from the Factories P3740. Wright Children's Employment Commission's report. Wright CP 112. Wright Granger Report and Evidence. Wright Horn Report and Evidence. Wright Dr. Knight Sheffield. Wright Simmons Report and Evidence. Wright Scriven Report and Evidence. Wright Laifchild Report Append. Part Roman 2 PL2 SS 1112. Frank's Report Append. Part Roman 2 PK7 S48 Tancred Evid. Append. Part Roman 2 PI 76 etc. Children's Employment Commission's Rept. Right, see Weekly Dispatch, March 16, 1844. Right, Thomas Hood, the most talented of all the English humorists now living, and like all humorists full of human feeling, but wanting in mental energy, published at the beginning of 1844 a beautiful poem, The Song of the Shirt, which drew sympathetic but unavailing tears from the eyes of the daughters of the bourgeoisie. Originally published in Punch, it made the round of all the papers. As discussions of the condition of the sewing women filled all the papers at the time, special extracts are needless. Right, Arts and Artisans, p. 137, et seq. Right, so called from the East Indian tribe, whose only trade is the murder of all the strangers who fall into its hands. Right, what kind of wild justice must it be in the hearts of these men that prompts them, with cold deliberation in conclave assembled, to doom their brother workman, as the deserter of his order and his order's cause, to die a traitor's and a deserter's death, have him executed, in default of any public judge and hangman, then by a secret one, like your old chivalry famederict and secret tribunal, suddenly revived in this strange guise, suddenly rising once more on the astonished eye, dressed not now in mail shirts, but in fustian jackets, meeting not in Westphalian forests, but in the paved Gallowgate of Glasgow. Such a temper must be widespread virulent among the many when, even in its worst acme, it can take such form in the few. Carlyle, Chartism, p. 40, Right, Dr. Ure, Philosophy of Manufacture, p. 282. Right, Philosophy of Manufacture, p. 282. Right, Dr. Ure, Philosophy of Manufacture, p. 367. Right, Philosophy of Manufacture, p. 366, et seq. Right, compare Report of Chambers of Commerce of Manchester and Leeds at the end of July and beginning of August. Right, see Introduction. Right, according to the census of 1841, the number of working men employed in mines in Great Britain, without Ireland, was men over 20 years, men under 20 years, women over 20 years, women under 20 years, together coal mines, 83,408, 32,475, 1,185, 1,165, 118,233 copper mines, 9,866, 3,428, 913, 1,215,407 lead mines, 9,427, 1,932, 40, 20, 11,419 iron mines, 7,733, 2,679, 424, 73, 10,949, tin mines 4,602, 1,349, 68, 82, 6,101 various. The mineral not specified 24,162, 6,591, 472, 491, 30, 1,616 total, 137,398, 48,454, 3,102, 3,000, and 31, 193,725. As the coal and iron mines are usually worked by the same people, a part of the miners attributed to the coal mines, and a very considerable part of those mentioned under the last heading, are to be attributed to the iron mines. Right, also found in the Children's Employment Commission's report, Commissioner Mitchell's report. Right, the coal miners have at this moment, 1886, 6 of their body sitting in the House of Commons. Right, E.G. Wakefield, M.P. Swing Unmasked, or the Cause of Rural Incendiarism. London, 1831, pamphlet. The foregoing extracts may be found pp. 913, the passages dealing in the original with the then still existing Old Poor Law being here omitted. Right, this has been literally fulfilled. After a period of unexampled extension of trade, free trade has landed England in a crisis, which began in 1878 and is still increasing in energy in 1886. Right, the agricultural labourers have now a trades union. Their most energetic representative, Joseph Arch, was elected MP in 1885. Right, report of the Poor Law Commission upon Ireland. Right, principles of population, vol. Roman II. Right, the state of Ireland. London, 1807, 2nd ed., 1821. Pamphlet. Right, Carlyle gives in his Past and Present, London, 1843, a splendid description of the English bourgeoisie and its disgusting money greed. Right, extracts from information received from the Poor Law Commissioners, published by authority. London, 1833. Right, to prevent misconstructions and consequent objections, I would observe that I have spoken of the bourgeoisie as a class, and that all such facts as refer to individuals serve merely as evidence of the way of thinking and acting of a class. Hence I have not entered upon the distinctions between the divers sections, subdivisions and parties of the bourgeoisie, which have a mere historical and theoretical significance. And I can, for the same reason, mention but casually the few members of the bourgeoisie who have shown themselves honourable exceptions. These are, on the one hand, the pronounced radicals who are almost Chartists, such as a few members of the House of Commons, the manufacturers Hindley of Ashton and Fielden of Todmorden, Lancashire, and on the other hand the philanthropic Tories who have recently constituted themselves Young England, among whom are the members of Parliament Disraeli, Borthwick, Ferrand, Lord John Manners, etc. Lord Ashley, too, is in sympathy with them. The hope of Young England is a restoration of the old Merry England, with its brilliant features and its romantic feudalism. This object is of course unattainable and ridiculous, a satire upon all historic development, but the good intention, the courage to resist the existing state of things and prevalent prejudices, and to recognize the vileness of our present condition, is worth something anyhow. Wholly isolated is the half-German Englishman Thomas Carlyle, who, originally a Tory, goes beyond all those hitherto mentioned. He has sounded the social disorder more deeply than any other English bourgeois, and demands the organisation of labour. Right, and it did. Right, Colophon, the condition of the working class in England, was published in 1845 by Friedrich Engels. It was translated from German in 1885 by Florence Kelly Wisniewski. This e-book was produced for Standard eBooks by Robin Whittleton, and is based on a transcription produced in 2005 by David Price and on digital scans from the Internet Archive. The cover page is adapted from The Seamstress, a painting completed in 1850 by George Frederick Watts. The cover and title pages feature the League Spartan and Sorts Mill Gaudi typefaces created in 2014 and 2009 by the League of Movable Type. This edition was released on June 30, 2026, 319 A.M., and is based on revision 9F675D8. The first edition of this ebook was released on June 22, 2026, 9:32 p.m. You can check for updates to this ebook, view its revision history, or download it for different e-reading systems at Standard Books. org/ebooks/Friedrich Engels/The Condition of the Working Class in England /Florence Kelly Wisniewski. The volunteer-driven Standard eBooks project relies on readers like you to submit typos, corrections, and other improvements. Anyone can contribute at Standard Books. Org. Uncopyright, may you do good and not evil. May you find forgiveness for yourself and forgive others. May you share freely, never taking more than you give. Copyright pages exist to tell you that you can't do something. Unlike them, this uncopyright page exists to tell you that the writing and artwork in this ebook are believed to be in the United States public domain. That is, they are believed to be free of copyright restrictions in the United States. The United States public domain represents our collective cultural heritage, and items in it are free for anyone in the United States to do almost anything at all with, without having to get permission. Copyright laws are different all over the world, and the source text or artwork in this ebook may still be copyrighted in other countries. If you're not located in the United States, you must check your local laws before using this ebook. Standard ebooks makes no representations regarding the copyright status of the source text or artwork in this ebook in any country other than the United States. Non-authorship activities performed on items that are in the public domain, so-called sweat of the brow work, don't create a new copyright. That means that nobody can claim a new copyright on an item that is in the public domain for, among other things, work like digitization, markup, or typography. Regardless, the contributors to this ebook release their contributions under the terms in the CC01 Universal Public Domain Dedication, thus dedicating to the worldwide public domain all of the work they've done on this ebook, including but not limited to metadata, the title page, imprint, colophon, this uncopyright, and any changes or enhancements to, or markup on, the original text and artwork. This dedication doesn't change the copyright status of the source text or artwork. We make this dedication in the interest of enriching our global cultural heritage, to promote free and libre culture around the world, and to give back to the unrestricted culture that has given all of us so much.